The wind howled across the frozen plains of Thriner, carrying sharp shards of ice that cut against anyone who dared to step outside. The planet had been covered in frost for decades. Once a land full of life, it had become a silent world where ice stretched as far as the eye could see. In the distance, massive shapes lay frozen beneath thick layers of snow and crystal. Dragons. Mighty creatures of legend, trapped in ice for so long that many had begun to think they were lost forever. A human walked slowly across the frost-bitten ground, boots crunching on brittle ice. His coat was heavy, lined with insulation, but it did little to hide the stiffness in his movements. He was a veteran, a soldier who had faced countless wars, countless losses. Scars ran across his hands, and his face was weathered from years of harsh conditions. His name was Kale Rin, and he had come to Thriner with a single purpose: to help the dragons, to awaken them from their frozen prison. He paused in front of a cluster of ice-encased dragons. Their bodies were enormous, even frozen. Wings stretched beneath layers of frost, tails curled tightly and sharp claws peeked through the ice. Their scales shimmered faintly beneath the frozen crust, but they looked lifeless. Kale knelt on the snow, resting a gloved hand against the ice. A cold tremor ran through him, not from the weather but from the weight of what he faced. "They've been here too long," he muttered to himself. His breath rose in clouds, mixing with the icy wind. "I don't even know if I can help them." Around him, the frozen landscape was eerily silent. No roar. No movement. Just the sound of the wind and the distant crack of shifting ice. Kale had read reports of dragons awakening after long dormancy, but this was different. They were trapped, immobile, and he was alone. No team had come with him. He had insisted on doing this himself, believing that one human, moving carefully and without fear, might reach them where others had failed. He took a small scanner from his pack and trained it on the nearest dragon. A soft glow illuminated the ice, revealing faint signs of life beneath the frozen surface. The dragon's heart still beat, slowly but steadily. Its eyes, though closed, showed signs of awareness. Kale's heart skipped a beat. The reports had been right. They were alive. Kale knelt closer, careful not to make sudden movements. He had learned long ago that dragons were not easily approached, even in their weakened states. Any sudden motion, any sign of fear, could trigger defense instincts. He lowered his voice, speaking softly as if the dragons could hear him. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." Hours passed as Kale worked. He brushed away layers of frost from small patches of exposed scales, warmed weak areas with portable heaters, and monitored the dragon's vital signs. Each one required patience and steady hands. It was slow work, and he knew that rushing could be fatal. The veteran had faced countless battles, but this was different. Here force did not work. Here strength was measured by care and patience. As he worked, he noticed something strange. One of the dragons, a massive creature with deep sapphire scales, twitched slightly beneath the ice. Not a movement of aggression, but a subtle shift, like a breathing exhale. Kale froze, his hand hovering above the frost. His heart pounded in his chest. "You're alive," he whispered. "You're really alive." The wind howled louder, whipping snow across his face, but Kale did not move. He waited, watching the dragon beneath the ice. Another moment passed, and the creature moved again. Its eye cracked open, revealing a glimmer of golden light. Kale held his breath. The dragon's gaze was slow, cautious, and ancient. It studied him, not with anger, not with hunger, but with something harder to define. Awareness. Curiosity. Kale slowly extended a gloved hand toward the ice. "I can help you," he said softly. "If you let me." The dragon did not roar. It did not lash its tail. It only watched. Another twitch, a soft crack in the ice, and Kale realized that for the first time the dragon was responding to him. Not fully, but enough to hope. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the frozen plains. Kale stood, brushing snow from his coat, and stepped back. He knew he could not save all of them at once. The work would take days, maybe weeks. But this first small sign was enough to keep him going. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply, and the wind became a fierce howl. Kale lit a small heater near the dragons, its warmth seeping slowly into the ice. He watched as the golden-eyed dragon blinked again, studying the light, studying him. Kale sank to the snow beside it, exhausted but determined. "I thought I was coming to save you," he said quietly. Maybe you're saving me too." The thought startled him. He had come here to heal dragons, to restore life where ice had taken it. But as he watched the dragons breathe slowly beneath the frost, he realized something. The patience, the quiet presence, the small victories, They were teaching him something he had forgotten: trust, care, and hope. Outside, the wind continued its relentless song. Inside the frozen hearts of the dragons, life was stirring. And inside Kale, a warmth returned, a courage and a hope that he had thought lost in the fires of countless battles. The veteran thought he was helping frozen dragons. But as the night stretched on and golden eyes watched him, he began to understand that they were healing him too. This was only the beginning. The next morning, the frozen plains of Thrinner glimmered under the pale light of two suns. Ice stretched in every direction, jagged and bright, reflecting the cold air. Kale rose slowly, stiff from the long night, but determined. The dragons were still there, each one encased in frost, but alive. Their breaths formed small clouds that drifted lazily in the icy air. Kale approached the golden-eyed dragon first. He had named it Leora in his mind, after the light that seemed to shine from her scales beneath the ice. Her gaze followed him as he knelt carefully beside her, checking her wing and tail for cracks or breaks. Her scales were tough, but frost had made them brittle in spots. Kale worked slowly, moving only when he was sure she would not react negatively. Hours passed in silence. Kale spoke softly, mostly to himself but sometimes to the dragons. "I know it's been a long time," he said. "I know it's cold and hard. But I can help. I promise." His voice carried over the wind, gentle, steady, and patient. He noticed a small movement under the ice, a flick of a claw, a twitch of a tail. At first he thought it was the wind. But then Leora's eye shifted slightly. She was watching him closely. Her gaze was cautious, careful, and for the first time, Kale felt that she might understand his presence was not a threat. Encouraged, Kale began to work on the frost covering her snout. He brushed away layers slowly, revealing the smooth scales beneath. The dragon made no sudden movements, only watching him, breathing in soft, measured exhalations. Kale's heart raced, but he kept his hands steady. For the first time he realized something: the dragons were responding to him. Not with fire. Not with anger. But with awareness. They were alive in more ways than just body. Their minds were active, sensing him, judging him, perhaps even deciding whether to trust him. Kale took a deep breath. He had faced enemies on countless battlefields, humans and aliens alike, but nothing had tested him like this. Here, force did not matter. Aggression would only destroy the fragile bond forming. The only way forward was care, patience, and attention to the smallest signals. Slowly, Leora moved her head a few centimeters. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Kale felt it in his chest. A spark of connection. She allowed him closer. He brushed snow from her wing carefully, watching her eye the entire time. Her pupil contracted slightly as he worked, a clear sign of awareness and focus. Other dragons around her began to show signs of life too. One, larger and darker, shifted its tail, making a soft sound as the ice cracked beneath. Kale approached cautiously, speaking softly. "I'm here," he said. "I won't hurt you." The dragon's eye opened slightly, a hint of green glowing within. It observed him silently, testing his intentions. By midday, Kale had created a small circle of warmth around Leora, melting just enough ice to allow her to move her wings slightly without pain. He watched her carefully as she flexed them, tiny movements that would have seemed impossible yesterday. He whispered encouragement, not to command but to reassure. "You're safe," he said. "You're healing." Leora blinked slowly, and for a moment, Kale felt as if she understood him. She did not speak. She did not roar. She only breathed steadily and watched. And Kale realized something important. This was the first connection. Not through words, not through fire or battle, but through care and presence. Time passed differently on the frozen plains. The sun moved slowly across the sky, casting long shadows, but Kale barely noticed. He focused on the subtle shifts, the twitch of a claw, the rise and fall of a dragon's breath, the tiny crack of ice melting under his hands. Every small gesture mattered. Every sign of awareness was a victory. In the evening, Kale stepped back to rest. Leora lowered her head slightly, not fully, but enough to allow him to sense a willingness to trust. The other dragons also moved slightly, shifting their weight, responding to the warmth and attention. It was as if they had accepted him, at least in part, into their frozen world. Kale leaned against a nearby ice wall, exhausted but alive with a strange energy he had not felt in years. He had expected the dragons to be fragile, to need his guidance completely. Instead, he realized they were teaching him too. His wounds, both physical and emotional, felt lighter. The quiet patience, the careful attention, the slow building of trust. It was healing him as much as he was healing them. He whispered into the cold night, almost to himself, I thought I came to save you. Maybe, you saved me too. The golden-eyed dragon shifted her head again, eyes half closed. A small puff of warm air met him, brushing against his face. Kale smiled faintly, feeling the warmth seep into him, melting a piece of the ice that had built around his own heart over years of war and loss. Night fell over Thriner, and the stars sparkled above the frozen plains. The dragons were still but alive. The veteran who had come expecting to help them had discovered something unexpected. Connection. A bond that did not require words, fire, or strength. Only presence. Only patience. Only trust. And in that silent, frozen valley, Kale understood the truth of his journey. This was the beginning of something far greater than he had imagined. Not just the dragon's revival but his own. The first connection had been made. And it was stronger than ice, colder than frost, yet warmer than anything he had felt in years. Tomorrow he would continue. And the dragons would be ready. The morning light stretched across the frozen plains, soft and pale, revealing the shimmer of ice that covered every surface. Kale woke to the quiet rhythm of the dragon's breaths. Their warm exhalations formed small clouds in the cold air, moving like gentle smoke. Each dragon was still mostly frozen, but life flowed faintly beneath their icy shells. The veteran rose carefully, stretching stiff muscles, and approached them slowly. Kale knelt beside Leora first. The golden-eyed dragon had shifted slightly during the night, her wing now partially free from frost. He touched her scales gently, brushing away small ice crystals, careful not to startle her. She flinched slightly at first but did not pull back. Her gaze followed him closely, filled with quiet curiosity. For the first time, Kale realized she was studying him as much as he was studying her. "It's okay," he whispered softly. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." His voice was calm, steady, but full of hope. The dragon's eye narrowed slightly, as if she was judging whether she could trust him. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Kale noticed. He moved slowly, working on her tail and wings, warming small patches of frost with careful tools. Every motion required patience. A single wrong move could send the dragons into panic or worse, harm them. Kale had fought in wars where one wrong step cost lives, but this was different. Here, success depended on calm, care, and respect. He began to understand that the dragons were not just creatures to be healed. They were teachers, showing him how to approach life without fear. Hours passed. The cold air bit at Kale's skin, but he hardly noticed. He was focused on the subtle signs: a twitch of a claw, a flick of a tail, the blink of a dragon's eye. Leora shifted slightly, her massive head turning toward him. Kale held his breath and waited. Slowly, very slowly, she lowered her head closer to his hand. He did not move, letting her decide the distance. This small gesture filled him with quiet triumph. Other dragons began to respond as well. One dark-scaled dragon lifted a claw and flexed it carefully, testing the ice around it. Another let out a low, gentle hum, a sound Kale had never heard before, soothing and calm. He realized that the dragons were not only noticing him, they were communicating in their own way. Every movement, every subtle sound, was a signal of trust. Kale knelt beside Leora, brushing his gloved fingers along her scales, feeling the warmth underneath. "You're stronger than you know," he whispered. "You've survived all this frost. You've survived alone. I'm just here to help." Her eye followed him, unblinking but softening slightly as if understanding his words. By midday, Kale had cleared enough frost around Leora's wings to allow slight movement. He encouraged her slowly, speaking softly. "Just a little stretch," he said. "I won't push. You decide." The dragon flexed her wings gently, careful, but clearly responding to his guidance. Each movement seemed to strengthen both of them, the dragon regaining control over her body, Kale regaining trust in his own ability to help without fear or force. Kale paused to rest, leaning back against a small ice wall. He watched as Leora and the others moved slightly, each tiny motion a sign of awakening. The veteran realized that this was not just about physical healing. These dragons had been frozen for decades, trapped in cold and isolation. Their trust had been frozen too. Every small gesture of patience and calm was breaking that ice, step by step. He remembered his own past, the battles, the losses, the nights when he had felt completely alone. Watching the dragons now, Kale understood that trust was fragile, and it could take years to rebuild. Yet here in the quiet frost he could see it forming slowly but surely. By evening, Kale had created a small circle of warmth for Leora and the others, using heaters and gentle shields from the wind. He sat nearby, hands resting on his knees, speaking softly. "You've lived through so much. You've endured. I hope I can give back just a fraction of what you've taught me. The golden-eyed dragon lifted her head slightly and exhaled a warm breath over him. The heat brushed against his face, a small gift from her. Kale smiled faintly. He had expected to be the healer, the one giving. Instead, he felt a quiet sense of being cared for, strengthened, and understood. The dragons were teaching him trust, patience, and hope, lessons he had almost forgotten. Night fell over Thriner, and the two suns disappeared behind the horizon. Stars twinkled coldly above the icy landscape. Kale settled beside the dragons, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the heaters. The dragons' subtle movements, the careful gestures of trust, and the quiet companionship were healing more than frozen flesh. They were healing years of battle-worn scars in him. He whispered into the cold air, almost to himself, "I thought I came here to save you. Maybe you're saving me too." A soft hum passed through the ice as Leora shifted slightly closer to him. Other dragons moved too, creating a quiet rhythm of shared presence. Kale realized that healing was no longer one-sided. He was learning to trust them just as they were learning to trust him. For the first time in years, Kale felt a sense of peace. Not complete safety. Not victory. But something more fragile and stronger at the same time, connection. The frozen dragons had begun to thaw, and so had his heart. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring more small victories. More movements, more gestures, more signs of life. But tonight, in the silence of frost and stars, Kale understood the truth. Healing was never just about giving help. It was about opening yourself to trust, patience, and understanding. And in that quiet, frozen valley, a veteran and a group of dragons were learning to trust each other, step by careful step, building a bond that would grow stronger than ice and colder than frost. The first lesson had been learned. Trust could be awakened and it could heal. The next morning, Thriner glimmered in soft sunlight, the ice reflecting pale gold and blue across the plains. Kale rose carefully, stretching stiff muscles, but he felt lighter than before. The dragons had moved slightly during the night, their small gestures of life stronger than yesterday. Leora had shifted her wings more fully, and the other dragons had begun to move with small, deliberate motions. The frozen world was slowly waking, and with it, Kale felt something awakening in himself as well. He knelt beside Leora first, brushing away frost from her wing. "Good morning," he whispered. "You're stronger today." Her golden eye followed him, and she shifted closer without hesitation. The movement was slow, careful, but deliberate, a signal of trust. Kale's heart lifted. As he worked, he began to notice something new. The dragons were not just responding to him, they were acting in ways that seemed to support him. Leora shifted her head and tail slightly, nudging him away from a thin crack in the ice. Another dragon, darker and larger, flexed its wings to block a gust of wind that might have knocked his tools away. Kale froze in surprise. They were helping him. He took a deep breath and smiled faintly. "So, this is how it feels to be watched over," he muttered. He realized that he had been coming here expecting to give. But the dragons, in their quiet way, were giving too. They were showing him that strength could come from patience, presence, and mutual care. The day passed slowly, but every small moment brought progress. Kale cleared frost from a small cluster of dragon scales, and in return, they adjusted their positions to let him reach areas he could not have otherwise touched. They leaned against him, softly, gently, not forcing contact, but allowing him to sense their warmth and trust. At midday, Kale paused to rest. He watched the dragons carefully. Leora flexed her wings fully, testing strength. Another dragon shifted its tail to keep him balanced on the ice. The rhythm of their movements was subtle, but Kale could feel the bond growing stronger. They were learning to move together, to share strength. He realized he had never truly understood what that meant before. In the quiet moments, Kale reflected on his own past. The wars, the losses, the long nights of fear and loneliness. He had been trained to fight, to survive, to rely on himself alone. But here, on the frozen plains, he discovered a different kind of strength. The dragons had taught him that strength was not always force. Sometimes it was patience. Sometimes it was trust. Sometimes it was letting someone, or something, help you. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ice. Kale had worked with Leora and the other dragons all day, and he could see real progress. Their movements were stronger, more deliberate, and coordinated in ways that had seemed impossible yesterday. He felt the warmth of the heaters, but more importantly, he felt the warmth of companionship. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept across the plains, knocking a small ice slab toward Kale's tools. Without thinking, Leora shifted her wing, blocking the slab from hitting him. Kale froze, heart racing, and looked up. Her golden eye met his, calm and steady. A message was clear without words: "You are safe with us." Kale swallowed, emotion rising in his chest. He had faced countless enemies, survived impossible battles, and yet nothing had made him feel this combination of awe and relief. The dragons, once frozen and untouchable, had become partners in his work, sharing strength where he had expected only to give it. He knelt beside her, letting his hands rest gently on her scales. "You're teaching me," he whispered. "I thought I was teaching you. But you've been teaching me all along." Leora lowered her head slightly, as if acknowledging the truth in his words. The other dragons moved closer too, shifting carefully to allow warmth and space. Hours passed, and Kale realized that the dragons' actions were deliberate. They were learning to move without fear just as he was learning to trust them. Together they navigated cracks in the ice, avoided hazards and shared warmth in the frigid air. Each small action built more than just healing, it built understanding. By evening the sun was low, and the sky glimmered with faint colors reflecting off the ice. Kale stood slowly, brushing snow from his coat. He looked at Leora and the others, who were now moving with more confidence and strength. They no longer seemed frozen in fear. They were aware, active, and communicating in ways beyond words. Kale felt a deep sense of gratitude and wonder. "We've done more than heal," he said softly. "We've learned together." The dragons exhaled warm breaths that brushed against his face, and he realized that the warmth he felt was not just from their bodies, it was from connection, from shared effort, from trust. As night fell, Kale lit a small circle of heaters to keep the dragons warm through the freezing hours. They settled beside him, wings and tails flexing slightly to stay comfortable, allowing him to rest as he had allowed them to move safely throughout the day. The quiet hum of life surrounded him, and for the first time in years he felt completely at peace. He whispered into the icy night, "I came here to help you. But you've helped me more than I could have imagined." Leora shifted her head, letting her warm breath wash over him again. Other dragons made small movements, a gentle symphony of awareness and trust. In that frozen valley, Kale understood something profound. True strength was not measured in battles won or enemies defeated. True strength was found in connection, in shared effort, in mutual care. The dragons had been frozen, yes, but they had never been untouchable. And Kale, a human who had thought he was alone, was learning that he was never alone when he allowed trust to guide him. Tonight they would sleep side by side. Tomorrow they would continue to heal, to move, to grow stronger together. A veteran and a group of dragons, once separated by ice and fear, had discovered a shared strength that could withstand frost, war, and years of solitude. The dragons were healing. Kale was healing. And together they were learning what it truly meant to be strong. The next morning the frozen plains of Thrinner looked brighter than ever. The sun reflected off the ice in soft, golden glimmers, and the wind carried less bite than before. Kale rose from his resting place, feeling lighter and stronger than he had in years. The dragons were moving more freely now, no longer trapped in their icy shells. Leora stretched her wings fully for the first time in decades, flexing them slowly and deliberately. Other dragons followed her lead, their movements graceful and sure. Kale watched quietly, smiling. He had come to Thrinner expecting to save them, to give warmth and life where ice had stolen it. But now he realized that the dragons had given him something equally important: trust, companionship, and a sense of purpose he had thought lost. He approached Leora, letting his hands rest gently on her scales. She leaned into him slightly, a small but meaningful gesture of connection. The frozen valley had changed. Where it had once been silent and lifeless, there was now motion and life. Small puffs of warm air rose from the dragons as they stretched and moved. Kale helped them carefully, adjusting frost or providing warmth, but the dragons no longer needed constant attention. They were learning to care for themselves again, and to care for him in return. As the day progressed, Kale noticed a remarkable thing. The dragons, once passive and wary, began to act in ways that protected him and each other. Leora nudged him away from a thin ice crack. A dark-scaled dragon flexed its wings to block a strong gust of wind. Even the smaller dragons, once too frozen to move, now shifted deliberately, helping maintain balance and safety across the icy terrain. Kale laughed softly, marveling at the turn of events. He walked among them, speaking quietly. "We've all learned so much," he said. "You've taught me patience and trust. I hope I've helped you heal too." The dragons responded in their subtle ways: a shift of a tail, a flick of a claw, a soft exhale of warm air. No words were needed, the understanding was clear. Over the next days, Kale and the dragons explored more of the frozen plains together. He watched as they moved with power and grace, testing their wings, flexing their muscles, and reclaiming strength lost over decades. Kale's presence was no longer a necessity, it was companionship. He realized that what had begun as a mission to save dragons had become something greater. They were partners now, sharing lessons, warmth, and trust. One evening, as the suns dipped low in the sky, Kale climbed a small ice ridge to look out over the valley. Leora and the others followed, landing carefully beside him. The wind had softened, and the valley seemed almost peaceful. The dragons spread their wings, and Kale could see the power and majesty that had once made them feared across galaxies. But now that power was tempered with awareness, patience, and calm. Kale knelt beside Leora, brushing frost from her wing one last time. "Look at you," he whispered. "You're free. And you've taught me what freedom really means." Leora's eye met his, golden and deep, full of awareness and quiet gratitude. She lowered her head slightly, letting him rest his hand on her scales. The other dragons moved closer, forming a circle around him. Kale felt a warmth unlike any he had known, a warmth that was not just physical but emotional. The veteran thought back to the first day he had arrived on Thrinner. The dragons had seemed untouchable, frozen in both body and spirit. He had expected them to need saving, but he had never anticipated that he would be the one truly healed. The ice that had built around his heart over years of battles, loss, and loneliness had begun to melt in the presence of their quiet companionship. Kale stood slowly, feeling the stretch of his body and the warmth of the dragons beside him. He raised his hands toward the sky. "We've all survived," he said softly. "We've all grown. And now, we move forward together." The dragons shifted, responding with subtle but deliberate movements. Wings stretched, tails flexed, heads turned. The communication between them was silent but powerful. As the sun set, Kale walked among them, letting his hands rest on scales, tails, and wings. Every gesture was a sign of mutual respect and understanding. The dragons were no longer trapped by ice or fear, and Kale was no longer trapped by memories of war and loss. Together they had found strength in one another. In the distance, the horizon glimmered with light reflected from ice and snow. Kale looked out, imagining the world beyond Thrinner, once so dangerous and cold, now full of possibilities. The dragons would soar again, free to explore skies and valleys, yet their bond with him would remain. He would carry the lessons they had given him back to human settlements. Lessons of patience, trust, and the power of kindness. Night fell fully over Thrinner. The stars sparkled coldly above, but the warmth below was undeniable. Kale sat among the dragons, letting the quiet rhythm of their breathing fill the valley. Leora lowered her head against his shoulder, and the other dragons nestled nearby. No words were needed. Silence carried meaning. Connection carried power. Kale whispered into the stillness, "I thought I came here to help you. But you've helped me more than I could have imagined. We're stronger together." The dragons exhaled warm breaths that brushed against his face. The veteran closed his eyes, feeling a peace he had not known in decades. The frost of the past had melted, replaced by something new: trust, companionship, and hope. As dawn approached, Kale stood once more looking over the valley. The dragons spread their wings, flexing and testing their strength. He knew the journey ahead would continue, days of exploration, training, and mutual growth, but he also knew that they would face it together. The frozen plains of Thrinner were no longer a place of isolation or fear. They were a place of renewal, where dragons and a human veteran had rewritten the meaning of strength, trust, and healing. What had begun as an effort to save the dragons had become a journey that saved them both. Kale took a deep breath of the crisp air and smiled. "A future rewritten together," he whispered. "That's what we've created." And for the first time in many years he felt completely at home. The dragons, once frozen and untouchable, were alive, free, and connected. And he, a veteran hardened by war, was healed, whole, and ready to face the future, not alone but together.